Imagine this. A woman, underestimated and dismissed by the world, rises from the ashes of betrayal to build an empire that leaves everyone who doubted her in awe. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's a tale of resilience, power, and the unshakable strength of the human spirit. What if I told you that the person you least expect could become the most powerful force in the room? What if I told you that the woman everyone thought was weak would one day make the arrogant billionaire who underestimated her regret every single word he ever said? This is the story of a woman who didn't just walk away. She walked into her destiny, leaving behind a legacy that would change the world forever. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how she did it. But beware, this story isn't just about her rise to power. It's about the secrets she uncovered, the battles she fought, and the price she paid to get there. So, if you're ready to dive into a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat, stick around. Because this isn't just a story, it's a lesson in what it means to truly rise above. Let's talk about you for a moment. Yes, you. The one watching this video right now. You're here because something about this title caught your attention. Maybe it's the idea of an underdog story. Or maybe it's the thrill of seeing someone turn their life around in the most dramatic way possible. Whatever it is, you're here because you're curious. You want to know how someone who was once seen as weak could become so powerful. You want to know what it takes to build an empire from nothing. And most importantly, you want to know if you could do it too. Well, let me tell you something, you're not alone. We've all been in situations where we felt underestimated, where we felt like the world was against us. But what if I told you that those moments of doubt, those moments of pain, could be the very things that propel you to greatness? That's exactly what happened to the woman in this story. And by the end of this video, you'll see that her story isn't just about her, it's about you. It's about what's possible when you refuse to let anyone else define your worth. Now, let's set the stage. Picture this, a luxurious boardroom filled with the most powerful people in the city. At the head of the table sits a billionaire, arrogant and unshakable, convinced that he holds all the cards. Across from him sits a woman, calm and composed, but with a fire in her eyes that no one else can see. To everyone in the room, she's just another pawn in his game. But what they don't know is that she's already 10 steps ahead. This is the moment everything changes. This is the moment she decides to walk away, not because she's weak, but because she knows her worth. And what happens next will leave you speechless. Because this isn't just a story about walking away, it's a story about what happens when you refuse to play by someone else's rules. It's a story about what happens when you decide to build your own empire, brick by brick, no matter how impossible it seems. But who is this woman, and how did she get here? That's the question we're going to answer today. Her name is Elena Carter, and her story is one of the most inspiring and shocking stories you'll ever hear. Elena wasn't always the powerful, confident woman you're about to meet. Once upon a time, she was just like you and me, trying to make her way in a world that didn't always make sense. She had dreams, she had goals, but she also had doubts. And then, one day, everything changed. She met a man who seemed to have it all: wealth, power, and charm. His name was Victor Kane, and he was the kind of man who could make you believe in fairy tales. But as Elena would soon discover, not all fairy tales have happy endings. Victor wasn't the prince she thought he was. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and he was about to change her life in ways she never could have imagined. At first, everything seemed perfect. Victor swept Elena off her feet, promising her the world. He introduced her to a life of luxury, of glamour, of power. But behind closed doors, things were very different. Victor was controlling, manipulative, and cruel. He made Elena feel small, insignificant, and weak. He convinced her that she needed him, that she couldn't survive without him. And for a while, she believed him. But deep down, there was a part of Elena that refused to be broken. A part of her that knew she was worth more than the way Victor was treating her. And then, one day, something inside her snapped. She realized that she didn't have to live this way. She realized that she was stronger than she thought. and she realized that it was time to walk away. But walking away was just the beginning. Because what Elena did next was nothing short of extraordinary. She didn't just leave Victor, she built a life for herself that was even more powerful, more successful, and more fulfilling than anything he could have ever given her. She started her own company, a tech empire that would soon rival Victor's. She surrounded herself with people who believed in her, who supported her, and who helped her grow. And she proved to the world and to herself that she was anything but weak. But here's the thing, Elena's journey wasn't easy. It was filled with challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But every time she fell, she got back up. Every time someone told her she couldn't do something, she proved them wrong. And every time she felt like giving up, she reminded herself of why she started in the first place. So, what's the secret to Elena's success? How did she go from being the woman everyone thought was weak to the woman who built an empire? That's exactly what we're going to explore in this video. We're going to dive deep into her story, uncovering the lessons she learned, the strategies she used, and the mindset that helped her overcome every obstacle in her path. And by the end of this video, you'll not only understand how she did it, you'll also have the tools to apply those lessons to your own life. Because here's the truth, Elena's story isn't just about her. It's about all of us. It's about what's possible when you refuse to let anyone else define your worth. It's about what happens when you decide to take control of your own destiny. And it's about the power that lies within each and every one of us to rise above our circumstances and create the life we truly deserve. But before we get into the details of Elena's journey, let's take a moment to talk about why this story matters. Why should you care about a woman you've never met, living a life that might seem completely different from your own? The answer is simple, because her story is a mirror. It reflects the struggles, the doubts, and the fears that we all face at some point in our lives. It shows us that no matter how difficult things may seem, there's always a way forward. And it reminds us that we are capable of so much more than we think. So as you watch this video, I want you to think about your own life. Think about the times you felt underestimated, the times you felt like giving up, and the times you've wondered if you were strong enough to keep going. And then, think about what's possible if you decide to take control of your own story. Because that's exactly what Elena did. And if she can do it, so can you. Now let's get back to the story. After walking away from Victor, Elena found herself at a crossroads. She had no money, no job, and no idea what to do next. But she did have one thing, a burning desire to prove to herself and to the world that she was capable of so much more. So, she started small. She took on odd jobs, saved every penny she could, and slowly began to rebuild her life. It wasn't easy, but she refused to give up. And then, one day, she had an idea. An idea that would change everything. She realized that the tech industry was booming, and she saw an opportunity to create something truly revolutionary. But here's the thing, Elena didn't have a background in tech. She didn't have a degree, or connections, or even a clear plan. What she did have was determination, creativity, and an unshakable belief in herself. And that was enough. With nothing but her wits and her willpower, Elena set out to build her own tech company. She taught herself everything she needed to know, from coding to marketing to finance. She worked tirelessly, often pulling all-nighters and sacrificing her social life to make her dream a reality. And slowly but surely, her hard work began to pay off. Her company started to grow, attracting attention from investors, customers, and even the media. But as her success grew, so did the challenges. She faced competition, criticism, and countless obstacles along the way. But every time she was knocked down, she got back up. And every time someone doubted her, she proved them wrong. Because Elena wasn't just building a company, she was building a legacy. A legacy that would prove to the world that she was anything but weak. But here's the twist, as Elena's empire grew, so did the tension between her and Victor. Because Victor wasn't just any billionaire, he was one of the most powerful men in the city. And he wasn't about to let Elena walk away without a fight. What followed was a battle of wits, a clash of titans, and a showdown that would leave everyone watching in awe. But who would come out on top? Would Elena be able to hold her own against the man who once controlled her? Or would Victor's wealth and power prove to be too much for her to handle? That's the question we're going to answer in this video. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. So, what's the takeaway from Elena's story? What can we learn from her journey? And how can we apply those lessons to our own lives? The answer is simple: never underestimate the power of resilience. Because here's the truth: life is going to knock you down. It's going to throw challenges your way, and it's going to make you question everything you believe in. But the key to success isn't about avoiding those challenges. It's about how you respond to them. It's about getting back up every time you fall and refusing to let anyone else define your worth. And that's exactly what Elena did. She didn't let Victor's arrogance, or the world's doubts, or even her own fears stop her from achieving her dreams. And neither should you. As we wrap up this introduction, I want to leave you with one final thought. The story of Elena Carter isn't just a story about one woman's rise to power. It's a story about what's possible when you refuse to let anyone else control your destiny. It's a story about the power of resilience, the importance of self-belief, and the incredible things that can happen when you decide to take control of your own life. So, as you watch this video, I want you to think about your own story. Think about the challenges you faced, the doubts you've had, and the dreams you've put on hold. And then, think about what's possible if you decide to take that first step. Because if Elena can do it, so can you. And who knows? Maybe one day your story will inspire someone else to do the same. But before we dive into the full story, I want to ask you something. What would you do if you were in Elena's shoes? If you were faced with the same challenges, the same doubts, and the same fears, would you have the courage to walk away and build your own empire? Or would you let the world define your worth? That's the question we're going to explore in this video. And by the end of it, you'll have the answer. So if you're ready to dive into a story that will inspire you, challenge you, and leave you wanting more, stick around. Because this is just the beginning. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. Elena Carter's story didn't begin in a boardroom or a penthouse. It began in a small, rundown apartment on the outskirts of the city, where dreams felt like distant stars and survival was the only goal. She grew up in a world where opportunities were scarce, and the weight of her circumstances often felt like chains she couldn't break. Her mother worked double shifts as a nurse, and her father, a factory worker, was rarely home. Elena learned early on that life wasn't fair, but she also learned something else. She had a fire inside her that refused to be extinguished. Even as a child, she was determined to create a better life for herself, though she had no idea how. That determination carried her through school, where she excelled despite the odds, and into adulthood, where she landed a modest job at a marketing firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. And then, one fateful night at a charity gala, she met Victor Kane. Victor was everything Elena wasn't: wealthy, powerful, and larger than life. He had a charm that could disarm anyone, and when he set his sights on Elena, she was swept off her feet. At first, it felt like a fairy tale. He showered her with gifts, took her to places she'd only ever dreamed of, and introduced her to a world of luxury she'd never known. But beneath the surface, there was something darker. Victor wasn't just charming, he was controlling. He began to isolate her from her friends, criticize her choices, and make her feel like she was nothing without him. Elena, who had always prided herself on her independence, found herself questioning her worth. She told herself it was love, that every relationship had its challenges, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. And then, one day, she reached her breaking point. The moment came during a heated argument in Victor's penthouse. He had belittled her in front of his associates, reducing her to nothing more than a pawn in his game. But this time, something inside Elena snapped. She looked at him, not with fear or anger, but with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She realized that she didn't need him or anyone else to define her worth. And with that realization, she walked out the door, leaving behind the life she had known and stepping into the unknown. It was the hardest decision she had ever made, but it was also the most liberating. Little did she know, that decision would set her on a path that would change her life and the lives of countless others forever. In the months that followed, Elena faced challenges she could never have anticipated. She had no savings, no job, and no support system. But she also had something she hadn't had in a long time: freedom. She began to rebuild her life from the ground up, taking on odd jobs and saving every penny she could. It was during this time that she stumbled upon an idea that would change everything. She noticed a gap in the tech industry and need for innovative solutions that no one was addressing. Despite having no background in tech, Elena was determined to fill that gap. She spent countless hours teaching herself everything she could about coding, design, and business strategy. It wasn't easy, but she refused to give up. And slowly but surely, her vision began to take shape. As Elena worked tirelessly to bring her idea to life, she crossed paths with a group of unlikely allies. There was Marcus, a brilliant but disillusioned programmer who had been burned by the corporate world; Priya, a fierce entrepreneur with a knack for marketing; and Javier, a former venture capitalist who had lost everything in a bad deal. Together, they formed a team that was as unconventional as it was unstoppable. Each of them brought something unique to the table, and together, they began to turn Elena's vision into reality. But as their company started to gain traction, they also began to attract attention, not all of it good. Victor Kane, who had once dismissed Elena as weak and insignificant, was now watching her every move. At first, he didn't take her seriously. How could a woman with no resources or connections possibly pose a threat to him? But as Elena's company began to grow, Victor's curiosity turned to concern. He couldn't stand the thought of someone he had once controlled rising above him. And so, he began to plot. Using his wealth and influence, he launched a campaign to undermine Elena's efforts, spreading rumors, sabotaging deals, and even poaching her employees. But Victor underestimated Elena just as he had always done. She wasn't the same woman he had once controlled. She was stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever. And she wasn't about to let him win. As the tension between Elena and Victor escalated, so did the stakes. Elena's company, now a rising star in the tech world, was on the verge of a breakthrough that could change everything. But Victor's interference threatened to derail everything she had worked for. Meanwhile, Elena began to uncover secrets about Victor's past secrets that could destroy him if they came to light. But revealing those secrets would come at a cost. It would mean risking everything she had built and possibly even her life. And then there was the question of trust. As Elena grew closer to her team, she began to wonder if everyone around her had her best interests at heart. Could she really trust Marcus, Priya, and Javier? Or were they hiding secrets of their own? The deeper Elena delved into her journey, the more she realized that building an empire wasn't just about money or power. It was about facing her fears, confronting her past, and discovering who she truly was. It was about learning to trust herself, even when the world seemed to be against her. And it was about realizing that her greatest strength wasn't her intelligence or her determination, it was her ability to rise above the challenges that life threw her way. But as the stakes grew higher and the lines between friend and foe blurred, Elena knew that the hardest battles were yet to come. And then, just when it seemed like things couldn't get any more complicated, a new player entered the game. A mysterious investor, known only as the Phoenix, began to take an interest in Elena's company. No one knew who they were or what they wanted, but their influence was undeniable. Some saw them as a potential ally, while others saw them as a threat. Elena wasn't sure what to think, but she knew one thing: the Phoenix had the power to change everything. Whether that change would be for better or worse, she couldn't yet say. But one thing was certain: the game was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. As Elena stood on the precipice of her greatest challenge yet, she couldn't help but wonder, had she come too far to turn back? Or was she just getting started? The answers to those questions would determine not just her fate, but the fate of everyone around her. And as the world watched, waiting to see what would happen next. One thing became clear. Elena Carter was no longer the woman Victor Kane had once controlled. She was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had turned her pain into power and her doubts into determination. And no matter what happened next, one thing was certain. She would never let anyone define her worth again. But as the shadows of her past began to close in, and the mysteries of her present grew deeper, Elena knew that the hardest part of her journey was yet to come. The battle for her empire and her soul was just beginning. And as the lines between friend and foe blurred, and the stakes grew higher than ever, one question remained: would Elena emerge victorious, or would the weight of her past finally pull her under? The answer to that question would change everything. But for now, all she could do was keep moving forward, one step at a time, toward the destiny she had fought so hard to claim. And as the world watched, waiting to see what would happen next, one thing became clear. This was only the beginning. As Elena's company, Phoenix Tech? Many secrets still hidden and so much at stake. One thing was certain: the road ahead would be anything but easy. And as the world watched, waiting to see what would happen next, Elena Carter prepared to face her greatest challenge, yet not just as a CEO, but as a woman who had fought tooth and nail to claim her place in the world. The question was, would she emerge victorious, or would the weight of her past finally pull her under? The answer to that question would change everything. But for now, all she could do was keep moving forward, one step at a time, toward the destiny she had fought so hard to claim. And as the world watched, waiting to see what would happen next, one thing became clear. This was only the beginning. As the dust settled from Victor Kane's dramatic downfall, Elena Carter allowed herself a rare moment of respite. The storm had passed, and Phoenix Tech was thriving, its revolutionary AI platform now a cornerstone of the tech industry. But Elena knew better than to let her guard down. The world of business was a battlefield, and complacency was a luxury she couldn't afford. What she didn't realize was that a new threat was already brewing, one that would test her in ways she could never have anticipated. It started with a series of strange occurrences: unauthorized access to sensitive company files, cryptic messages left on her desk, and a growing sense that someone was watching her every move. At first, Elena dismissed it as paranoia, the lingering effects of her battle with Victor. But when a high-profile client abruptly pulled out of a major deal, citing concerns about Phoenix Tech's security, she knew something was wrong. The stakes were higher than ever, and Elena was about to face an enemy she hadn't seen coming. The first clue came from an unlikely source: Marcus, her lead programmer, who had been acting increasingly distant since the fallout with Victor. One night, he showed up at Elena's office, his face pale and his hands trembling. He confessed that he had been approached by a shadowy figure offering him a fortune in exchange for insider information about Phoenix Tech. At first, Marcus had refused, but the pressure had become unbearable. He had been threatened, his family put at risk, and he had no choice but to comply. Elena listened in stunned silence, her mind racing. Who could be behind this? Victor was out of the picture, but his allies were still out there, and they had every reason to want revenge. As Marcus handed over a flash drive containing evidence of the threats, Elena realized that this was bigger than she had thought. This wasn't just about sabotage, it was about dismantling everything she had built, piece by piece. The plot thickened when Priya, Elena's marketing guru, uncovered a series of fake social media accounts spreading damaging rumors about Phoenix Tech. The accounts were sophisticated, their origins nearly untraceable, but Priya managed to trace them back to a shell company with ties to a powerful tech conglomerate. The conglomerate, known as Nexus Global, had been a silent competitor for years, lurking in the shadows while Phoenix Tech took the spotlight. Elena had always suspected that Nexus would make a move, but she hadn't expected it to be so personal. The attacks weren't just aimed at her company, they were aimed at her, designed to undermine her credibility and destroy her reputation. As Elena dug deeper, she discovered that Nexus Global's CEO, a reclusive billionaire named Damien Voss, had a personal vendetta against her. The reason? Elena's mother, the woman who had secretly supported her all those years, had once worked for Damien, and she had walked away with a secret that could ruin him. The revelation sent shockwaves through Elena's world. Her mother had never mentioned Damien Voss, and Elena couldn't understand why she had kept such a crucial part of her past hidden. When she confronted her mother, the truth finally came out. Decades ago, Damien had been involved in a scandal that threatened to destroy his career. Elena's mother, who had been his assistant at the time, had uncovered evidence of his wrongdoing. Fearing for her safety, she had fled, taking the evidence with her. Damien had spent years trying to track her down, and now that he had found her, he was determined to silence her and anyone connected to her. Elena realized that her success had made her a target, not just for her achievements, but for the secrets she carried. The stakes had never been higher, and the enemy had never been more dangerous. As Elena prepared to face Damien Voss, she knew she couldn't do it alone. She turned to her team, asking for their loyalty and support. Marcus, racked with guilt over his earlier betrayal, vowed to do whatever it took to make things right. Priya, ever the strategist, began crafting a counter-campaign to expose Nexus Global's underhanded tactics. And Javier, who had once kept secrets of his own, revealed that he had connections in the tech underworld. Continued to rise, the pressure mounted in ways she could never have anticipated. The mysterious investor known as the Phoenix had injected a significant amount of capital into her business, but their identity remained shrouded in secrecy. Elena couldn't shake the feeling that this benefactor had ulterior motives, but with Victor Kane breathing down her neck, she had no choice but to accept the help. The stakes were higher than ever, and every decision felt like walking a tightrope without a safety net. Victor, meanwhile, was growing increasingly desperate. He had tried to sabotage Elena's company at every turn, but each time, she managed to outmaneuver him. His arrogance had blinded him to the fact that Elena was no longer the woman he could control. She was a visionary, a leader, and a force to be reckoned with. But Victor wasn't the type to admit defeat. If he couldn't destroy Elena's empire, he would find another way to bring her down. And he had a plan, one that would test Elena in ways she could never have imagined. The first sign of trouble came when one of Phoenix Tech's flagship products, a revolutionary AI platform, was hit with a devastating cyber attack. Critical data was stolen, and the company's reputation was on the line. Elena knew this wasn't just a random act of sabotage, it was personal. She suspected Victor was behind it, but proving it was another matter. As she and her team worked around the clock to contain the damage, Elena began to notice cracks in the foundation of her carefully built empire. Marcus, her lead programmer, had been acting strangely, disappearing for hours at a time and avoiding her questions. Priya, her marketing guru, seemed distracted, her usual fiery determination replaced by a quiet unease. Even Javier, her most trusted advisor, seemed to be hiding something. Elena couldn't shake the feeling that her team was keeping secrets from her, and the thought of betrayal cut deeper than any cyber attack ever could. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse, Elena received a cryptic message from an anonymous source. It contained a single sentence: "The Phoenix isn't who you think they are." The message sent a chill down her spine. Could her mysterious benefactor be working against her? Or was this another one of Victor's mind games? Elena knew she couldn't ignore the warning, but she also couldn't afford to waste time chasing shadows. She had to stay focused on saving her company, even as the walls seemed to be closing in around her. Meanwhile, Victor was making his next move. He had uncovered a secret from Elena's past, one that could destroy everything she had worked for. It was a secret she had buried deep, hoping it would never see the light of day. But Victor had a way of digging up the past, and he was prepared to use it to his advantage. As the tension between Elena and Victor reached a boiling point, an unexpected twist threw everything into chaos. During a high-profile industry event, Elena was approached by a woman she had never met before. The woman introduced herself as Dr. Evelyn Hart, a renowned tech entrepreneur who had disappeared from the public eye years ago. Evelyn claimed to have information that could help Elena take down Victor once and for all, but her help came with a price. She wanted a seat at the table, a stake in Phoenix Tech. Elena was torn. On one hand, Evelyn's expertise could be the key to defeating Victor and securing her company's future. On the other hand, trusting someone new felt like a gamble she couldn't afford to take. But with time running out and the stakes higher than ever, Elena knew she had to make a decision, and fast. As Elena grappled with the weight of her choices, the subplot surrounding her team began to unravel. Marcus confessed that he had been working on a side project, a secret AI program that could potentially outshine Phoenix Tech's current offerings. He claimed it was meant to be a surprise, but Elena couldn't help but wonder if there was more to the story. Priya, meanwhile, revealed that she had been in contact with Victor, though she insisted it was only to gather intel on his plans. Javier's secret, however, was the most shocking of all. He admitted that he had known about Victor's plan to sabotage Phoenix Tech all along, but he had stayed silent in the hopes of protecting Elena. The revelations left Elena reeling. She had trusted her team with everything, and now she wasn't sure who she could trust at all. The stakes had never been higher, and the lines between friend and foe had never been blurrier. As Elena stood on the brink of what could be her greatest triumph or her most devastating failure, she realized that the battle for her empire wasn't just about money or power. It was about trust, loyalty, and the courage to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. And as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Elena knew that the final showdown was just around the corner. But with so many secrets still hidden and so much at stake, one thing was certain: the road ahead would be anything but easy. And as the world watched, waiting to see what would happen next, Elena Carter prepared to face her greatest challenge, yet not just as a CEO, but as a woman who had fought tooth and nail to claim her place in the world. The question was, would she emerge victorious, or would the weight of her past finally pull her under? The answer to that question would change everything. But for now, all she could do was keep moving forward, one step at a time, toward the destiny she had fought so hard to claim. And as the world watched, waiting to see what would happen next, one thing became clear: this was only the beginning. ASE, the dust settled from Victor Kane's dramatic downfall. Elena Carter allowed herself a rare moment of respite. The storm had passed, and Phoenix Tech was thriving, its revolutionary AI platform now a cornerstone of the tech industry. But Elena knew better than to let her guard down. The world of business was a battlefield, and complacency was a luxury she couldn't afford. What she didn't realize was that a new threat was already brewing, one that would test her in ways she could never have anticipated. It started with a series of strange occurrences: unauthorized access to sensitive company files, cryptic messages left on her desk, and a growing sense that someone was watching her every move. At first, Elena dismissed it as paranoia, the lingering effects of her battle with Victor. But when a high-profile client abruptly pulled out of a major deal, citing concerns about Phoenix Tech's security, she knew something was wrong. The stakes were higher than ever, and Elena was about to face an enemy she hadn't seen coming. The first clue came from an unlikely source: Marcus, her lead programmer, who had been acting increasingly distant since the fallout with Victor. One night, he showed up at Elena's office, his face pale and his hands trembling. He confessed that he had been approached by a shadowy figure offering him a fortune in exchange for insider information about Phoenix Tech. At first, Marcus had refused, but the pressure had become unbearable. He had been threatened, his family put at risk, and he had no choice but to comply. Elena listened in stunned silence, her mind racing. Who could be behind this? Victor was out of the picture, but his allies were still out there, and they had every reason to want revenge. As Marcus handed over a flash drive containing evidence of the threats, Elena realized that this was bigger than she had thought. This wasn't just about sabotage. It was about dismantling everything she had built piece by piece. The plot thickened when Priya, Elena's marketing guru, uncovered a series of fake social media accounts spreading damaging rumors about Phoenix Tech. The accounts were sophisticated, their origins nearly untraceable, but Priya managed to trace them back to a shell company with ties to a powerful tech conglomerate. The conglomerate, known as Nexus Global, had been a silent competitor for years, lurking in the shadows while Phoenix Tech took the spotlight. Elena had always suspected that Nexus would make a move, but she hadn't expected it to be so personal. The attacks weren't just aimed at her company, they were aimed at her, designed to undermine her credibility and destroy her reputation. As Elena dug deeper, she discovered that Nexus Global's CEO, a reclusive billionaire named Damien Voss, had a personal vendetta against her. The reason? Elena's mother, the woman who had secretly supported her all those years, had once worked for Damien, and she had walked away with a secret that could ruin him. The revelation sent shockwaves through Elena's world. Her mother had never mentioned Damien Voss, and Elena couldn't understand why she had kept such a crucial part of her past hidden. When she confronted her mother, the truth finally came out, decades ago. Damien had been involved in a scandal that threatened to destroy his career. Elena's mother, who had been his assistant at the time, had uncovered evidence of his wrongdoing. Fearing for her safety, she had fled, taking the evidence with her. Damien had spent years trying to track her down, and now that he had found her, he was determined to silence her and anyone connected to her. Elena realized that her success had made her a target, not just for her achievements, but for the secrets she carried. The stakes had never been higher, and the enemy had never been more dangerous. As Elena prepared to face Damien Voss, she knew she couldn't do it alone. She turned to her team, asking for their loyalty and support. Marcus, racked with guilt over his earlier betrayal, vowed to do whatever it took to make things right. Priya, ever the strategist, began crafting a counter-campaign to expose Nexus Global's underhanded tactics. And Javier, who had once kept secrets of his own, revealed that he had connections in the tech underworld that could help them take Damien down. Together, they formed a risky, audacious plan that would either save Phoenix Tech or destroy it. But as the pieces fell into place, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. Damien Voss was a master manipulator, and he always seemed to be one step ahead. What if this was all part of his plan? What if they were walking right into a trap? The tension reached a boiling point when Elena received a chilling message from Damien himself. It was a video, showing her mother sitting in a dimly lit room, her face pale but defiant. Damien's voice echoed through the speakers, cold and menacing. "You have something I want," he said. "And I have something you want. Let's make a trade." The message was clear. Damien had kidnapped Elena's mother, and he wouldn't release her until Elena handed over the evidence that could destroy him. Elena was faced with an impossible choice. If she gave in to Damien's demands, she would be putting countless lives at risk, including those of her employees and clients. But if she refused, her mother's life would be in danger. The weight of the decision threatened to crush her, but Elena knew she couldn't afford to falter. This was the moment she had been preparing for her entire life, the moment when she would have to prove, once and for all, that she was more than just a survivor. She was a fighter. As Elena and her team prepared for the final showdown, the lines between friend and foe blurred even further. Javier revealed that he had once worked for Damien, a fact he had kept hidden out of fear. Priya discovered that one of their investors had ties to Nexus Global, raising questions about who they could really trust. And Marcus, still haunted by his earlier betrayal, began to question whether he had the strength to stand by Elena's side. The pressure was immense, but Elena refused to back down. She had come too far to let fear dictate her actions. With her team behind her, she devised a plan to outsmart Damien Voss, using his own tactics against him. It was a gamble, but it was the only way to protect her mother, her company, and everything she had fought for. As the story hurtled toward its climax, the stakes had never been higher. Elena Carter was no longer just a CEO. She was a symbol of resilience, a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever been underestimated or overlooked. But the battle ahead would test her in ways she could never have imagined. Would she be able to outmaneuver Damien Voss and save her mother? Or would the weight of her past finally pull her under? The answers to those questions would determine not just her fate, but the fate of everyone around her. And as the world watched, waiting to see what would happen next, one thing became clear. This was only the beginning. The fight for justice, for freedom, and for the future of Phoenix Tech was far from over. And Elena Carter was ready to face it head-on, no matter the cost.